Would you like to know the date of your own death? That's what most people say, no. But most countries and most companies, not to mention the other half of your couple, would probably be pretty interested in the result. So when I read about a website called deathclock.com, I couldn't resist. I went online, answered a few simple questions. Okay, this is not super scientific. But out popped the one answer I really hadn't expected. It told me the date of my demise would be July 3rd, 2067. That would put me at the ripe old age of 106. Exactly. I'm in my mid-50s. Most of my friends have been talking about slowing down, retiring, learning to play golf. And this silly little online game suddenly woke me up to the fact that I might have almost as many years ahead as I have behind. And that as a woman in her 50s, I might just be entering my very best career years rather than ending them. There are two deep trends at play here: longevity and gender balance. These two things are impacting everything and everyone: countries and companies, couples and careers. I'm just going to talk about the last two here today. But in your career, are you planning for a 50-year span? And in your couple, do you think your I do will hold true for 70 years? We may need to reset our mindsets and move away from kind of gearing up for a sprint to preparing and muscling up for a much, much longer marathon. So careers are lengthening, couples are gender balancing, and dual careers are really becoming the norm. But we still underestimate the complexity of these systems that we're creating that have a lot of people in them with a lot of really different expectations. What are we talking about? Usually 2 bosses, 2 companies, 2 careers, a little bit of home help if you're lucky, 2 spouses, as many kids as you were able or chose to have. Not to mention yourself, your own ambitions. Usually friends and the gym have kind of fallen off the radar. And all this in a context where companies and countries haven't really kept up with the pace of change. Companies aren't that flexible. Careers are super demanding. Daycare is super scarce. And it usually lands on our individual shoulders to figure out how we're going to balance all of the professional demands with our personal goals and be available 24/7. Now, progressive countries and companies are trying. They're introducing more flexibility and agile working. We're slowly shifting away from maternity leave to parental leave, or even better, family leave. But these aren't necessarily trickling all the way down. So George, an MBA student of mine, told me recently that when he asked his boss, his boomer boss, if he could take parental leave, the boss said, "Sure, but you can forget that promotion that you were up for." Josh, another colleague of mine, had to actually sue his company to get the parental leave that his wife was automatically entitled to. Mindsets and policies are changing much more slowly than our couples are. So it ends up that one of the most crucial career decisions we make is who our personal partner is, and whether we are really leveraging our dual career couple, not just for our career ambitions, but for our life. And that will mean maybe moving on from some kind of old vocabulary and paradigms that people are still talking a lot about, like this whole issue of work-life balance. Whoever thought of putting into opposition work and life? For most of us, work is a deeply intrinsic part of life. What we really want to think about, and what it really offers, is dual career couples become a key foundational stone to key success in both work and family. And that the whole picture, the sum of those different parts, becomes what most people would call life. Dual career couples offer a myriad of benefits. They lower risk, they add support, they double the money, and they give you the kind of flexibility in life that allows each partner to change course over the course of a lifetime if they choose. But these kinds of couples aren't that easy to manage. They take what I call conscious coupling, where we might need to think about bringing some of these leadership skills that we're bringing at work home. We've all learned and spent a lot of time getting good at strategic planning, visioning, building engagement with our teams, learning how to give and receive feedback. Companies have spent decades developing leaders, but most couples have spent decades developing almost everyone and everything except their relationship. When's the last time you had a performance evaluation with your partner? Isn't it funny that in the end, the team we actually spend the least amount of time on happens to be the most important team in our life, our personal team, our home team? Now, in this era of dual career couples, that is slowly changing, but only just. I know a company that's just introduced 360 feedback assessments for your families. I know another one that here in the UK, the School of Life just started offering a series of coaching programs for new couples. A CEO couple friend of mine, they take one day off every 6 months as an away day where they focus only on their relationship. And my husband and I hugely enjoy our monthly structured listening sessions where we talk only about us. Now, I'm not suggesting that we turn love into work. That would be dull and sterile. But can we become more skilled at love? Can we, in fact, become leaders at love? Can we build a super resilient home team ready for the long haul? Do you know how? We're going to start having to move away from some old thinking in this new age. Just as countries and companies are struggling to adapt to longevity and gender balance, so are couples. People are marrying a lot later. It's getting later and later as time goes by, which means that when they marry, they're generally a little bit further along in their careers. And as you can see on this graph, women are consistently marrying men just a little bit older than they are, which means that usually the man has a few years advantage in both earning power and career advancement. So that leads often to some lousy short-term choices when the family questions start arising. And inevitably, couples will default to the lesser earning partner will flexibilize and slow down to take care of the family. But this often views family care as a cost rather than as an investment in the future, and may substantially compromise the earning power and career opportunities of the dual career couple as a whole. So instead of creatively designing a life that happens to have two careers in it, we tend to get together and try and continue on two parallel careers, which often ends up feeling like our partner's career is competing with ours rather than complementing it. What we might want to start thinking about is what I call conscious coupling that is built on other models of how we work and love together. We're moving slowly away from what used to be the dominant model, either the single career or lead career models. Although I warn you, these still dominate at the top of most organizations. But there are so many other options. Alternators take turns in being the lead partner. Parallelograms, they fast track together, although that's a tough call. Complements use different kinds of careers with different pacings and life cycles to work together more effectively. And some will be mergers. They'll throw their lot in and start a family business. And a growing number of people are becoming sole players who will choose to stay single, or life just works out that way. And some of these different models may be relevant at different parts of the life cycle. So Jane and Mark started out as parallelograms. When they graduated from their MBA program, they went into 2 fast-track corporate careers. A few years later, when they wanted to start a family, they didn't think that model would serve their personal goals. So they decided to switch to complements. Jane left the corporate job and started a business in her kitchen. 10 years later, Mark decided to quit his corporate job and join Jane in the company that had grown well beyond the kitchen. They switched and became mergers. They scaled the company and sold it very successfully. And in that pattern of multiple models at the relevant moment of time, they managed to achieve not only all their career goals, but also all their life goals. In addition to all these new models, there's also an emergence of entirely new decades in life. The 20s and the 50s, for example. The 20s, which is now being referred to, excuse me, anybody who's in their 20s, as emerging adulthood, is partly a consequence of the fact that we're getting married so much later and delaying certain kinds of decisions, which means the 20s is a time of discovery and travel, transition and creation, preparation for the next phase. Turns out, the 50s is remarkably like this now. 50s see young, older adults, newly healthy, active, and fit, who are also in their post-empty nest decade deciding that they too want to travel, discover, transition, and recreate for the subsequent decades. Couples can also start creatively using these differences. Maybe one partner would do a traditional kind of sprint, while the other partner could peak a little bit later, as I'm beginning to see a lot of women post-50 start to do in their post-empty nest decades. And we might also see that the impact of the parenting years on people's careers, particularly on women's careers, may lessen as those years become a smaller and smaller percentage of an ever-lengthening whole. So, if you're listening to this and you're in your 30s struggling with all the impossible balancing act everybody is thrusting upon you, relax, breathe deeply, and play a much, much longer game. The real question is pacing. How will you manage across 5 to 6 decades of work, love, and life? I think the answer is we're going to have to become really good transitionists. We're going to have to learn how to move through different careers and also through different life phases. We may also have to move through different relationships as lives lengthen. While divorce rates have been falling quite dramatically over the last 20 years among the educated, they've been doubling among the over 50-year-old crowd, who might be discovering, along with the joys of their empty nests, that they might be facing some pretty empty marriages too. a lot depends on how much was invested in those relationships in the prior decades. Because it turns out successful marriages are a lot like successful companies. They're not without crises, but built into them are the systems and skills to manage those crises and work through them to become more resilient, or to know when to leave them behind. Resilience is going to be anchored in our ability and capacity to grow or go, both at work and at home. So who knew that love and leadership would share so many commonalities? It both take a tremendous amount of self-awareness and the ability to create unifying visions that bring people together. The careers were never about besting the rest. They were always about getting the better of ourselves. And couples are about supporting somebody else to do the same. So it turns out great leaders don't just inspire the many, they also support the one. So here's to loving the other leader in your wonderful, long, and lengthening life. Thank you very much.